Wait, is it recording? Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah, it's recording now.
Okay.
I have to remember what's the intro I did.
Who cares? Like,
Yeah,
this
well,
is a new version. Who cares?
that's true. What's up, everyone? This is Kenji Kaneko. I'm a product designer. I'm joined here by my lovely co-host Licheng, a UX researcher. Licheng, how are you doing?
A lot of stuff happened. I'm sure that's going to be the topic of our discussion today.
For sure. It has been like 6 months since our last podcast. So I'm sure a lot of stuff has happened. Yeah, our last podcast was in December 2021. So
Just a little bit,
I
just
think,
a few months.
just the world was still going maybe a little bit better than it is now. A lot has changed.
Indeed.
So today we can't recap the past 6 months, but today we were going to talk about layoffs and life changes. Obviously, a lot is going on in the economy, and personal things on our pod as well. Some changes upcoming, or not changes upcoming, changes that have happened. I guess, do you want to share, Licheng, of a little bit about from your side what the life changes have been recently?
Yeah, buckled up. So firstly, I moved to a new city. Like, this is Chicago. So still in Midwest. And secondly, I got laid off, and hence the topic today. I joined small startups and got laid off recently, like 2 weeks ago. And I have been going through those whole emotions, everything in between. And while I thought like it was just me trying to go through it, and then what do you know? The rest of the tech field, particularly certain type of tech companies, are going crazy, right, these days about layoff. And when you hear like there's like 10%, nah, that's not enough. Company go for 15, like 18%, like something number crazy there. So that's why I felt like it's a good time for us to chat about this probably shared experience in this very moment.
Yeah, there's a lot there. I think there's so many companies in the news recently. Coinbase, you had mentioned, like, I think Coinbase, they laid off about 15 to 18% of their staff. Tesla laid off a bunch of folks.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of reminds me of, I mean, it's a different scenario, but like now companies who grew too fast in the pandemic, during the pandemic, are now being like, oh crap, our growth's no longer so fast, and maybe they see a impending recession too, and so they're cutting back. But I wonder if it's also like, during the pandemic, when the pandemic first hit, some companies use that as a time of like to trim the fat essentially, and just be like, oh, we are like Airbnb had a lot of employees, and I think they used it as a time of like, how many people do we actually need, right? And trimming. So, but obviously, sorry you got laid off. That's very not great. Although I have told you personally and privately, I think you have no problem finding the next gig based on your skills and ability.
You jinx it.
Knock on wood. Knock on wood. Knock on wood.
And people who are hiring, like, Licheng is here, so who are listening.
And also, what's crazy is that I think I sent you a video. There was a Wall Street Journal had put out this video of like this year's class of undergraduates is like in the best position possible, and that was about a month ago. They put out this like 10-minute YouTube video. I was like, is that true? Because a lot of these grads are coming out making over 100K for like non-software engineering jobs, which is totally crazy.
Yeah.
But however, then I saw there's like new reports now that a lot of these college grads are getting their jobs rescinded. So it's a lot of this, like the scenarios of, and that's been happening to folks across the tech industry. But a lot of that is occurring where, maybe it seemed great and now it's not seeming so good. So
I mean, we're only in the tech industry, right? And particularly we're in the UX field. So I don't, I felt like there's a lot of things I don't know beyond like these fields. So but at least like you're right, like the high growth companies, they seem to get hit harder, right? Like so, because much of their business model is like spending, and getting the market, and then hopefully the economy of scale will eventually help. So UX is a part of that process. So like if we got impacted, that totally makes sense. At the same time, I do agree there is duality there here. Like one hand, we see people like getting laid off. One hand, the job market is actually pretty hot because I'm in the
Yeah.
job market right now. I still feel like it's pretty hot. It's definitely not as bad as like the beginning of the pandemic. It feels like nobody's hiring. So or everybody's so hesitant about putting positions out there. That was very different. I remember that because like when the pandemic hits, I was actually helping to hire a few roles, particularly contract roles for my company at that time. And oh my god, it was just
That
like,
was Thomson Reuters. Sorry, I'm going to call your history,
ooh,
right? Was that Thomson
good.
Reuters?
Contextualize it. Yes, Thomson
That sounds like
Reuters.
that's such a long time ago. Sounds
It
like, oh
feels
my
like,
gosh.
yeah, it feels like lifetimes ago, but it
Yeah.
actually just 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Um, but I remember that time, not many people are hiring. We're one of the few who are actually hiring. And partially it's because the industry we're in are a little bit shielded from the service industry, which got hit really, really hard.
Yep.
So, um, and then I remembered people who are obviously super overqualified, like, submitting a lot of application for our contract roles. And I was just like, are you sure you want to apply for this role? But it speaks to the scale, right? Um, People get laid off and the hiring is frozen like so much. But this time I feel a lot different. I feel like people got laid off, but also the hiring is still not significantly slowed. It might
Yeah.
shift to a different type of company or different industries, but like,
Yeah, probably it's like the Coinbases, the Robin Hoods of the world,
mhm, mhm.
the Zooms, maybe a little bit. The places that have like been on huge growth paths have like slowed down. But like at my company at Cisco or other places, I feel like there is still like a glut of we have these job openings open forever and we're having a trouble finding certain level. Of course, all of these companies are looking for like senior level and above, right?
Right, right,
So that's
right.
also a problem there. But yeah, it definitely feels different than the pandemic. Like I remember you telling me that story of, yes, people with like crazy amounts of experience applying for these short contract roles, which they're going to stay in for what, 6 months maybe, or it's like
But
totally
the
wrong.
second, like, the market bounce back a little bit, like
Yeah,
they
you're
will
out
leave.
of
And
there.
everybody knows that, and they should.
Yeah.
Honestly, they should. Their experience warrants so much more than a contract position that we offer at that time. So, but either way, like, I feel like this is a different time. But it doesn't mean that the layoff is still not personal. This is
Yeah.
still so, so personal. Like, I personally feel that it it makes you doubt, it makes you question, it makes you face a lot of emotions you probably don't feel every day, like that sense of insecurity, right? They force you to face it, and either you like it or not, you got to deal with that. So that's a really rough journey that particularly, hopefully you don't have other life changes going on at the same time. If you have other life changes going on, like me, like, right, moving to a new place and having a dog at the same time while you're getting laid off, like, that's like, it is like tough. It
Yeah,
could
there's a
get
lot
really
of it.
rough.
Can we talk about your journey a little bit of
Yes.
um so you had mentioned you were at a startup, right? So I guess I'd be curious to learn a little bit more. Share with the audience like what attracted you to this startup,
Mhm.
and what was the journey like prior to getting laid off?
Yeah, yeah. Oof. All right. Now I have to
Maybe
like.
that's like a 45-minute monologue, but I mean, yeah, just say it however you want to say it.
Well, you mean Licheng talking about alone for 45
I'm
minutes?
gonna get some popcorn. I'll just watch the show.
Yeah, and get some cucumbers or something, like, just do your facial like
Right.
skin routine, like while I'm speaking. Um, I The short version is that at that time I was December last year. I was at Instacart, doing research there, and I got reached out like for this great opportunity to work in a smaller startup. And at that time, I will be employee number like 14 or 15 or something very early on. So it got me really wonder. I remember asked you this question, right? Like I was like, wow, they really hire a UX person early on because usually for a SaaS company, those position will be left for either a sales or for a engineer or something like that, right? So it was a good sign to me at that time.
For a researcher specifically, yeah.
For
For
exactly
designer,
for
yeah, companies will hire a designer pretty early.
particularly for a researcher, exactly. So I got a contact and then talk about stuff, getting to know everyone. So I actually believed in a lot of the visions that what the company trying to do. By the way, the company is in the SaaS space for cloud management, so it's definitely not sexy as like AR VR, guys. Like so, like
Are you
cloud.
are you are you giving me clues? Are these clues to the audience? Okay, he said SaaS management, cloud based. Maybe what part of the country they're going to start putting the puzzle pieces together of like what the name of this company is
Yeah,
over time.
Do the Sherlock thing. But and by the way, it's on
14
my
employees.
and it's on the LinkedIn. So like
Yeah,
feel free
yeah,
to
we could
figure
easily you could easily find out. Yes.
that out. But
Anyway, okay, so it's in the SaaS space, so
yeah,
not something super sexy.
yeah. But consider like well, depending on what people are looking for, right? So it's SaaS company for cloud management. So basically, there are companies deploy their infrastructure to the cloud using AWS, Azure or Google Cloud Platform or whatever, right? So that's a SaaS company trying to help people to manage those assets online. So it's definitely a technical field.
Yeah.
There's some bar of entrance for domain knowledge. So, but I loved it. I loved the possibility. So I joined. So I did a really great, things. And I wrote a blog post and I sent it to you. And there's a lot of stuff. But fast forward, um, I sensed it, before like, getting laid off. I definitely start to feel like there's a vibe, going around and saying that, oh, the first sign is that like we probably may not be able to hit the fundraising target for the year. Because at that time, when I got hired, we're using the seed round of money. It's actually a decent amount of money, honestly, for a seed round, but it's still a seed round, right? So at some point, you have to raise Series A. So the first sign is that, oh, I feel like we'll probably not be able to hit Series A, at least in this year, maybe next year or other time. Another thing is that our growth is stagnant a little bit
From a user side or revenue
from the
and user.
revenue perspective.
Yeah.
Yes, so I couldn't say because of the NDA, I couldn't say like how exactly that, but I felt that slowed down a little bit, and along with like wasn't able to raise the money that we might need right to sustain. So I'm like, oh, there's some cost cutting might come. um and yeah, so in some ways in my heart I kind of know certain things, certain changes will happen, but who ever planned yourself to get laid off, right? So I still hope like I made a lot of contribution to the team. Hopefully it's not me, but eventually, me get laid off. There's a morning that I got a call from the co-founder, and then we chat about it. It's basically you got laid off, and this is the tough decision we have to make, along with other functions too.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I would say that a huge chunk of a company got laid off. It's not just me. So and some even job function completely gone. Like for me, once I'm gone, there's no more UX anymore in the company, along with some other functions there. So it obviously is not the first choice too, right? So if they can, they will try to maintain a lot of job functions.
Yeah.
Uh, but not that's not necessarily the case. It hits me really hard though, because the first reaction I had is that is there anything I have done? I hope I have done differently, right?
Yeah.
To make the product is a little bit more appealing, so that the experience is better, so that people buy that more, so that I don't get laid off, right? So sometimes you got stuck in that kind of loop of self criticism. That is it because of me? Like, but by the way, for people working a startup, it's more likely to happen. I really feel like it to get stuck in the mind loop, because people tend to have stronger ownership, right, in the startup world, that you have to wear multiple hats. You want to own what you do for, and there usually no people help you, right? You're on your own. So for people who have a strong ownership, that's tend to happen. Like, can you just find the position? Like, are you
I'm
going up and
deciding whether I want to sit down or stand up. The problem is I sit down all day and then I rarely use my standing desk, so I need to stand up a little bit, and then I'll probably sit down in 5 minutes.
okay, so like you gotta stop there, like before you just like made me dizzy and it's just like, hey, oh my god, it's
Just doing this elevator game.
yeah, exactly. But hey, you have a standing desk to use it. Your back will thank you. I mean, my back is definitely yelling at me right now. Um, but either way, yeah, that's the thing. I sensed it. I feel really sad. I feel I'm part. I wish I've done more. Right? I kind of criticize myself. Maybe it's me didn't do a good job. Right? And then the bad news is that even if I have that idea, which is not true, I think I tried absolutely my best, like, in that role. Um, but you feel like there's something you wish you can blame on, because like
Hmm.
when things are out of control, you're trying to gain that control back, either in a self-destructive way or not, right? So you're trying to blame yourself because somehow that's more controllable than the war happening, in Russia, right? So, or any kind of like a downturn in the economy. So that's one of the first things I have to fight with, is not letting your own mind kind of go haywire, and then just find whatever reasons that I can blame on to gain a little bit of sense of control back in your life. So later on, it becomes one of the main theme. How do you maintain a level of self-centeredness and maintain your routine, even if your routine is lost, right? So like
Hmm.
that's another thing maybe I'm still not doing really great with. And thirdly, it's like, what you gonna do? Should you take a rest? Should you quickly revise your resume and try to send it out and try to get a job? Like, there's many things you can do, and then it's a tough, like, to recognize both you need the time to recover, at the same time you have to do something because their bills needs to be paid, particularly for millennials, right? So a lot of us have a lot of debts, either one way or
Hmm.
another, that we have to be responsible for. So it's really rough. You got caught in the rock and hard places that you want to stop, give yourself a little bit of time, but reality tells you can't. You have to move forward. So, how to find that mental space to accommodate both at the same time is extremely challenging. And by the way, I'm gonna write a blog about a post about this. Like, the three ways I really help me. Should I talk about that? Should I use this as my advertisement moment? This episode is sponsored by Licheng.
You can just use this episode for that. One of the things I'm curious about, I think, is like we talked right initially when you got laid off, which was what, like 3 weeks ago, probably,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
and then now it's been some time. So I'm just curious as to like mentally how has time changed how you are thinking about things, or
Mm,
uh, either that's reflecting on your time there, reflecting on the way that you were laid off, or thinking about the future. Like, just curious as to like how has time, they say time heals, but like how has time impacted your mindset now? It sounds like some of it has gotten a bit healthier, of like moving
yes.
away, less away from like, oh man, I'm blaming myself, or what could I have done differently, or I poured my heart and soul into this, and to like more
Yeah.
just acceptance with, hey, this happened. Maybe it wasn't my fault. I did try my hardest, and like, slowly getting back. Obviously you kind of have
Mm,
to get back on the job market at some point, but
yeah.
yeah, just curious on that, of just like how time has impacted things.
Well, it's definitely a journey, but somehow I feel like time does not heal. The only thing that heals is yourself. You heal yourself. That's actually it happened to be that, like, with time you have more mental space, start to allowing yourself to move forward, and allowing yourself to look at things in a different way. So I don't think it's the time actually doing the active healing. It's still yourself. So you can still like passively get stuck in certain mindset and let time goes by, but it doesn't help anything at all. So eventually it's still up to the person. At least for me that's the case.
Yeah.
And also I have therapy, so like that helps too. Oh, by the way, that's another downside, right? When you get laid off, you lose access to insurance too. So guys who are going through layoff, think about that too. Like you might lose access to the things you might need when you need the most during layoff, but unfortunately you lost access to them, or at least you are loaded, like you can pay everything out of pocket.
Yeah, that's a plug for, I think, like one couple things is get Cobra, right? You need some sort of insurance.
Yeah.
And two, hopefully your company is not shitty enough that they also give some sort of decent severance package or like,
Yes. Yes.
I think when Coinbase actually rescinded offers, people didn't even work there yet.
Yeah.
And people have their beef with Coinbase. But when Coinbase rescinded offers,
Yeah.
they did give, I want to say, like 2 months worth of salary and benefits to people who didn't even put 1 hour of work in yet.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like that at least shows to me like, and obviously they have maybe more money than a Series A, or sorry, pre-Series A seed startup, but
Yeah.
at least shows to like, hey, sorry we screwed you guys over or you all over. Here's some, at least like,
Yeah.
we'll set you up for a couple of months to continue on with your job search, so you don't have to worry about those
Yeah. Yeah.
health and basic life things.
Yeah.
Um,
But like I felt like they did the right thing. I felt right. So
who's they? Your company or Coinbase?
Coinbase, like in this case, they did the right thing. They basically treat the employee incoming employee as employee already and give them benefits, right? During the transitional time. So they did the right thing, and their company may or may not, follow that. So in a way, I still feel like it's the awareness on us as employees to have the awareness that there's a lot of access, there's a lot of resources that we have easy access to. You might lose it when you need it the most because a lot of things are tied to your employment status. So, and that's, by the way, it's a kind of fucked up place thing about America. I do feel like we should have access to medication, right? Even if it's a human right thing. Okay, well, never mind. Like I'm not just like,
we can talk about, I guess, universal healthcare while we're on this podcast too.
well, even not universal, but some certain level of like a basic access to it. Like, but either way, just be aware that when you lose access, lose employment, you might not get access to therapy, which might actually help you tremendously, right, in that period of time. So be prepared. I try to, at least in my case, try to be more intentional about how you treat yourself during that time if you don't have access to therapy anymore. So I happen to have, and that helps a lot. So yeah, so I think number one, going back to what we're talking about before I derail us into like social welfare, um, or employee rights or like worker rights, right? Like well, whatever.
Yeah.
Like
Good severance packages.
it's always good. It's always appreciated. Um, so your best advocate is not time. Your best advocate is yourself. Eventually, still you doing the hard work. And hopefully, with time, you have more places and space to do it. And for me, I definitely feel the difference. Like in the beginning, it was definitely a lot of why? Why the heck this happened to me? You know? And I think UX person in many ways are analytical people, right? So that's part of our job to figuring out which part works, why it didn't work, like what kind of solution we should propose to fix that. So don't use that route. Don't resort to the analytical part of your brain and saying that why this happened, what should I do, like what kind of plan I should have, like how can I fix this? That's a lot of pressure putting on yourself. Actually, I feel it's more helpful. It's just accepting. Like stop asking why universe do this to me. Accepting that there's a lot of things you probably would never figure out why. you know so and then move on, which is hard, which is super super hard. Again, it goes back to that feeling that once you feel you understand why, you feel your life is less chaotic, right? It feels more in control, which is very tempting in a chaotic time. But you gotta really go against your own brain and saying that it's okay that I don't know why. And I have a blank faith in myself. I will get something. I will be fine. I don't know when, I don't know how, I don't know in what way, but I just believe in it. So which is so different from how we typically think at work. which is much more evidence based, data driven, like so all those words.
Hopefully.
So, fight against what you're good at work, because this is a much different issue. So that's the first lesson I learned, and hopefully I can, other people going through a similar journey will learn too. Is that no need to figure out why. Even if you don't figure out why, you can still be great. You can still have a good future and everything, and you're still gonna be safe, like which is very hard. So the second part is about fighting against this tendency to hide. When I got laid off, like it was, I don't know how to bring this up to people. I really don't. I,
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's partially it's because the ownership thing we just talked about. You felt you failed. It's not the company failed, and then you as a collateral, like right. So in the process, you feel like it's you failed. You feel you get somebody laid you off, right? So because you feel like you're so much like so much involved with the kind of thinking, it feel sad or tempted not to share that with people, which is exactly the opposite of what you need at that moment. You actually need the most social support. You need people to know where you are in your life, what kind of things you go through. And potentially that's how you'll get support, right? So I have this strong intention. I'm just like really don't know. Should I tell people? Who should I talk to? Should I tell people on LinkedIn? That means that my future employer might see it, right? That I might be desperate. I might be like, whatever. So you think about image. You think about what it says about you when you say that yeah, you get laid off. The tendency is really to hide, to not to tell people the bad part of your life, quote unquote bad, right? So we
Mm-hmm.
don't know if that's bad or not, and then only show people the good part, and that's really really rough. And what I'm happy to do is that I had a post on LinkedIn, and I think I tried to add you, and somehow LinkedIn just doesn't allow me to tag you, and I'm just like, okay, the Kenji, you are banned by LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Um, um, but it was so awesome the second I released that post, telling people that not only I got laid off, but I feel I was forced into retirement. I feel that all my ambition kind of has to be on pause right now with that project or whatever product I was working on at that moment. So I was just sharing people how exactly I feel, and I get so many authentic follow-ups from people either I know or I don't know, which makes me feel like holy crap, like this is not as bad. It still sucks. It still sucks so bad, you're right? Because like people's comfort word does not change the fact you might run out of money paying the bills, right? So it doesn't change that. But it makes me feel those issues are so much smaller that I can actually manage them. Yeah, the bills still have to be paid. Yeah, like there's
Right.
still responsibility, but it's not the end of the world anymore. So you still have a capability to move on, and that capability will lead you to be okay at some point. So that enlarged mental space is really helpful. It's actually not well, people's words still help you, make you feel like less alone, less like helpless, less directionless. But I think that eventually it's the mental space you, because of those words that you feel really give you a sense of like, yeah, I can move, I can afford to move forward, even if I know it's going to be rough. So for a little bit while. So that was really, really anticipated. So don't hide. I know it's very, 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 very easy. And if, especially America, right? So we tend to keep it to ourselves, like, and even if in the culture in tech that it tend to be a little bit more transparent, I think it's still very much there, trying to keep it to ourselves.
Yeah.
So don't do it. Don't do it. It's actually the opposite what you need. What you really need is finding the support. And I feel there's a lot of people want to give you the support, but they don't know where you are in your journey and your life stages, right? So be transparent gets a long way. That's the
Well,
two things.
I would say well, thank you first of all for sharing that. I would say on your point of like how will this look to future people, I think it's also different in that like a lot of people are getting laid off now, right? So it's almost like you look at layoffs, you don't think, wow, Licheng, he must have been a terrible employee. It's
Right.
more like, oh, it's a situational, just like during the pandemic, people will be like, it's a situational thing. If you got laid off from a company, probably
Mm-hmm.
not going to say, wow, that person got laid off. Versus if it was like, I feel like that's pretty more rare nowadays anyway, of like, wow,
Mm-hmm.
they were a terrible employee, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, kudos to you for sharing out there. I remember seeing all the comments on there as well. I think I commented something too. But yeah, I think like it's almost like it may not be as stigmatized for other people who are laid off, right? Of like you
Yeah.
did a good thing because then you never know what comes out of that. People might hit you up and be like, I would love to work with Licheng and bring
Yeah.
you aboard their team. One
Yeah.
one thing I was thinking about was like because this I think obviously as you share this seems to have hit you pretty hard. I wonder is it like if you had gotten laid off from Instacart, would
Mm.
have it been as intense of a feeling, or would you have? Do you feel like you would have felt differently?
I don't know. That's so hard to tell. Um, but I definitely feel ownership is lower when I'm in this car. Well, that's probably for good, right? So it's
Yeah,
a
large
well-oiled
company.
machine at that time. So either a person in the machine or not, the machine should work, right? So like, um, the fact that either I got laid off or not, probably Insta going to be fine, right? So probably in a way I wouldn't. Um, be as upset for the startup. Yeah, because it's my action. I choose to walk away from certain opportunities, and I choose to walk into it. Definitely, there's a level of ownership there, both of your decision as well as ownership of the things you're working on, either that's a service or a product or a feature or whatever. So I think the ownership does lead to a lot of like self-blaming or whatever that is. Or you second guess, like, did I make a good decision or not? Like, right? Which, by the way, is super not helpful, right? So no matter what happened in the past, we shouldn't second guess ourselves, like because you made the decision you feel most reasonable at that moment, given the information you have, given the context you're in. So you cannot evaluate and use the current context in in the past context too, right? So that's hopefully not people are doing that. But the thing is, all of those is in your head. Yes, like you said, right? So from outside, people may not like have that judgment on me or anybody who got laid
Right.
off.
Yeah.
Think that like you are so bad. That's why you're so worth it. You deserve to be laid off. Like hopefully not. But at the same time, in your head, it's such a different world because it's such a much more intimate day to day thing. You're feeling a turbulence, right? So honestly, I hope like that's what UX people help our product team to understand, right? For us, it could be just like changing a button, changing the thing, but it actually might mean very different things in people's day to day. So from externally outside, how we view certain things might be such a different experience when that person himself like experienced that in that context, in that emotional stage, or whatever that is. So the difficulty is really against yourself. I felt like for me
Mm.
for the past 3 weeks, it's not necessarily worrying about other people. It's really about like I feel my brain has so many thoughts and it's so hard to calm them and let them focus on the bigger picture. Instead, like my brain's really trying to like I should fix this. I should do this right now because like um, the machine just running like 2,000 miles per hour. So that part was really really hard. But yeah, you're right. Like I think in Instacart I may not be, and also Instacart seems to be pretty fine. Like so sounds like they haven't announced any given.
I don't know about that, but
Right,
yeah.
like, yeah, they cut their like evaluation, which I think is a great thing because like uh, the worst case is that right when you go to IPO and then realize that the valuation is so not what the actual value is, and then it just like drop dramatically, like everybody lost in a way, and it probably deter a lot of investors to invest in the beginning, right? They're like, I think this is the value too high, so I don't want to invest in it. So I think bringing it down is a good idea. But at the same time, so far they haven't announced too many things yet. So hopefully all the coworkers I still have there do not have to
Are safe.
experience that. Yeah,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. I wonder, like, with this is going to sound so ridiculous in some ways, but I'm going to say it anyway. So
Oh,
imagine your
oh.
scenario with, like, you had worked at the startup, super small. You had you're so still hands on early. You're very invested, right? And like,
Mm.
I mean, you're not vested, I guess, stock wise, you haven't invested yet. But anyway, you know what I'm saying? Emotionally, you're invested
Good
because you have a
eye.
lot of impact over the product. So the way I think of this is like similar to almost like a relationship, right? If you are
Yeah,
if you're in a relationship, and I promise I'm going somewhere with this. If I'm in a relationship and I'm really into this person, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
I'm like really all about it, and then out of the blue they like walk out the door, and I felt like I poured
yeah,
my heart and soul into it, that is a lot more devastating than if I'm like, and I've been in these relationships before where they're like, man, I'm okay, I'm half-assing it or whatever it is, right? Like
yeah,
you're just like okay in it. It's not really you haven't invested as much.
yeah.
Um, but so like
You're right.
the gains, so you're like both getting heartbroken, but also you've poured a lot into the relationship. At least in a relationship, you've poured a lot into it, and there's probably some really happy moments and like
Yeah,
things you've loved about it.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I think similarly, from at least what I'm hearing from you too, is like it's not like you regret the decision, just like a relationship after
mhm,
time or you after reflection, maybe more so. You're not like, man, I regret it because it ended this way. Hopefully not. But you're like, I invested, like, which one is worth more? Is it worth more to not have invested and not get hurt? Or is
yeah,
it better to have like invested a ton and then in the end potentially get, well, I guess in this scenario, do get hurt,
yeah,
but you have like that experience of putting your all into it or whatever,
yeah.
right?
I
um
think I think you hit it head on, like Kenji, because I think, yeah, I think a relationship exactly how I felt too. It is a form of relationship you had, you build and you nurtured, right, with your employer, with your coworkers, with the thing you're familiar with. That's all the relationships there. And yeah, there are two different kind of life philosophy. Either one is right or not, like right. So there's no right or wrong about what was how do you determine how much you should invest, like should you be more like transparent and vulnerable, keep investing even if it might flip
mhm,
in a
mhm.
relationship, or you're smart and saying that, oh, I feel like it's going to flip, so I decided not to invest too much, like to avoid it happening. So I think there's just like it's different ways of handling life. For me, obviously I chose the first one, right? So I know there's a risk for pre-A company, so I walked into it. Hopefully by being there I can make it a little bit better, so the worst case doesn't happen. But if that happened, you have to accept it. But you're absolutely right about relationship, that element, because when I got laid off, I do feel I lost something. You know,
Yeah.
when somebody say in a relation with you and they walked away, you feel you lost. You feel you're moaning like over a lot of stuff that you probably don't wasn't ready to let go yet. At least not in the fashion that it really happened. So you have there are not much like things you can do at the moment but to accept, but go back to reevaluate why you chose to go into a relationship in the first place. So what you really want to get is not just on the surface that yeah, you're all together all the time, right? There's a reason why you chose to enter that relationship, and that's the meaning of everything. So yeah, like if a relation may not work out, it doesn't change that meaning. You can still keep that meaning,
Mhm.
move on to the next one, or like tell yourself that this is still what I'm looking for, and hopefully it will work out a little bit better, and hopefully next time will be a little bit wiser, a little bit more stronger, like everything. So, but you're absolutely right. Like I felt when I got laid off, I felt um yeah, I definitely felt like I lost some part of something. I still couldn't figure out what exactly is that, but it's a loss. It's a loss, emotional
Yeah.
loss in
Yeah.
a way. Yeah, I love that you use a relationship because, like, It sounds like you have been through that, like, yourself, like.
Somewhat.
Just
No,
say yes.
somewhat.
Just say
Yes,
yes.
I
Come
guess
on.
so.
Yeah.
I've been through the half-assing of relationships where I'm like, man, whatever. If this doesn't work out,
Yeah.
I would say that with my wife, I'm pretty emotionally involved. So if she was to walk away, I'd probably be pretty sad.
Oh,
So
oh my
I will
God.
admit that yes, I am emotionally attached to my wife. I suppose you
Yeah.
could say.
But there are people saying that you shouldn't be emotionally attached to your work, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
there are people
I
saying,
would say the bad part of my analogy is like you probably should not equivalate a job with with a relationship, right? Like
mhm,
if
mhm,
we look at this asymmetrically, if you when you leave a job, right, when you
mhm,
quit a job, when you fire a company, essentially where
mhm,
you lay off a company,
mhm.
that company doesn't really mourn or anything, right? It's not
Yeah,
like they're like, oh wow, this, it's like, oh crap, we're gonna need to get a new researcher or designer, or someone's gonna fill in for Kenji or Licheng. But there is an asymmetry there of
yeah,
like,
yeah.
when you have gotten laid off, you felt this loss. But if you had quit your company, it's not like there wouldn't be the company, the entity of the company, not
Mhm.
even the CEOs or the co-founder or whatever. The entity wouldn't feel like a whole and be like, I'm crying that Lee Chung is gone. It would just be like,
Yeah,
it would take like a little dent, like a little phalanx in a war, and then it would like people would regroup and it would shift a little bit, basically.
yeah.
Yeah,
I still have a little bit uh, like similar but a different kind of perspective on that. I feel like it's similar kind of what we discussed, right? So if you know you're gonna get hurt, would you still walk into an experience? Right, like would you do it? Like I think there's no right or wrong answer for it, and same thing for here too. Yeah, you can choose to actually treat this relation you have at work as something meaningful, oh actually very very meaningful to you, right? And then there are people telling you that you shouldn't, right? Because like there is a different power dynamics you share, like between you and your employer, and it's a lot easier for them to move on than you to move on, right? So like you shouldn't invest in that anymore. Like you should treat that as a job and then find other passions outside of work, right? So there's definitely one school of saying that, and I think there's a much wisdom in that too. But also there are people saying that uh, everything you do, you should just like go try 100%, like
yeah.
try to invest in that. But I think I'm much in between. I think it's like only if you wanted your work to be meaningful to you in your life, then you should do it. If you don't want to, then you shouldn't do it, right? So the issue is really about like how much you know about yourself. Like are you looking for like a work life that is a huge chunk of your personal life too?
Identity, yeah.
Yeah, if you think that's your value, then go for it, right? So like treat every job kind of like a relationship in a way. Go for it. And that's because that's the where you can get most maximum happiness too, right? Like if you don't, you feel like no, life is life, work is work, then yeah, I don't think that's a good idea at all. Like, to kind of like walk into either a small company, big company, whatever, and throw 100% into it and treat it kind of like something like almost like a source of happiness. So it's really up to a personal value, and then how you decide. Now you know your value, what you decide to act on it. And for me, what I learned from this process is that I'm exactly somewhere in between. Like like there are certain company, it makes me feel so like ugh, so excited.
Hmm, hmm.
I feel like I want to throw 100% everything I want to, I have at it. I want to do this, I want to do that, and there are definitely certain problems that I'm just like, that sounds like it's more like a job.
Hmm,
So,
hmm.
right. So it just not very clear to me before I go through this layoff. I think it's a little bit clear to me now, but I think it's still, I'm going to use the next 20 years, like to figure out like what that work value that I have. But I have a feeling that you are more on the like, I want to have fun at work, and I want my work to be super super meaningful and stuff like that. Is that right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, yeah. I think like Probably I'm over obsessed with work as a part of identity. And
Your boss is not listening, so it's okay. You can
no,
say what you
it
want to
doesn't even matter if I'm the boss. I don't really care. I think what would be like I was thinking about a few things, right? Like
Yeah.
while you were chatting too. One is, and I don't think you've done this, right? But well, let me get psychological for a second. So there's this phenomenon called the peak end rule.
Mm.
Are you familiar with it? Peak end.
I hate English. Just explain to me,
Peak,
please.
PEAK dash end, END. Anyway, there's a theory, psychological theory called peak end rule. Danny Kahneman talks about it in Thinking Fast and Slow. Basically, they did some experiments with people doing colonoscopies,
Mm.
and found that like one version, I'm not gonna get this 100%, but one version of the colonoscopy, the person had like really sharp pain points, and so like went really high, and
Mm,
then
mm,
in
mm.
the middle, and then also at the end, it went really high too. But the overall, and then so that was version one version, and but it was shorter, right? And in the second one they had people do colonoscopies, and it went much longer, and the pain was didn't hit quite as high, and he
Mm,
but then over the course of the time that person experienced a lot more pain because it was a longer set, like it was, I think it was 2 or 3 times the length of the corresponding. But anyway, when people were asked, okay, which one, like when people, I think, well, they didn't do both of them, but when they rated like how pleasurable that
mhm,
experience was, the people in the second experiment basically found to be more pleasurable, even though they experienced more pain,
mhm,
cumulative pain overall. The
mhm.
point of this is basically that humans as a whole, like we tend to judge things either by how bad like something is at its peak or by how something ends.
Mhm,
So that's what I was
mhm,
trying to get at with you. It sounds like even though this ended in a really crappy way and maybe you got laid off in a way that you didn't want to,
mhm.
like one of the things that it seems like now you're reflecting on, or when we talk too, it's like, man, well, yes, it ended shittily, and I'm maybe heard about that, but I also like learned a lot out of this, and I also was like a really valuable experience
Yeah,
versus. I
yeah,
think it's easy for that's what where I was getting at, and relationships go the same way too, where like if a
yeah,
breakup's terrible, people will say like, man, that relationship sucked, and this person was horrible to me, even though maybe during the
yeah.
vast majority of it they had a great relationship, but it ended in a really bad way.
Like I love that example because like I think like it's also something probably for UX professionals, so we should be more aware of, like, you know, how people experience something is not equally distributed across time and space, right? Like in that case, like, the experience we had like most recently have a disproportional effect in how we view the overall experience, right? So that
Hmm.
is that is something we should be,
Mindful of.
mindful
Yeah.
of, like,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah.
So like, but at the same time, that's why I hate about behavior research in general, right? So behavior research is just one of the ways of doing research, right, in the research world, like, and because sometimes I ignore about agency so much to a point we forgot, like, we're animals. We're conditioned by a lot of biophysical conditions, and that's where the behavior research are saying is, right. Like, we have a lot of structures in us make us to, even if we believe it happened one way, but it actually, the body, tend to behave in different ways, or mind tend to be different ways because of evolution, because of many many things. But we are more than just an animal, right? So agency here is that, yeah, we probably got overly influenced by the last few days of my layoff, like,
Yeah.
honestly. But I can be better than that. I can find certain ways and tell myself, like, but that's not all story. I can get over the fact that, um, the last few days is not everything. So, and that's where those reminding of values, reminding of why you go to a company in the first place, will help you get out of that kind of a mindset that you got trapped in the last few days of experience, right? So, in a way, I really hope, like, that's a lot of things I was just saying is that we get trapped in our own brain, like when you get laid off. It's nothing to do how people view you. Sometimes it's really about how you experience things. But you gotta be intentional, like, help yourself a little bit to get over it, and knowing that that kind of feeling are all temporary. All of those are not, forever. and you have different ways to look at things differently, and potentially you have a different experience to after you take a different perspective. And that's the kind of perspective I want to take in this one, is that hopefully you know hopefully of life changes are chances for recalibration in your life, right? So yeah, you didn't want to get laid off, but you got laid off. But
Mm-hmm.
it's time for you to recollect a little bit what you learned about yourself in the last job, and then rethink about like where you want to take yourself to in the next place. So like hopefully that's how we view at those experiences, rather than just like everything sucks. Oh, trust me, I have days like that. There's one day I'm just like, everything sucks. I'm gonna die poor. I'm gonna be living under the bridge because I couldn't pay everything. I would never find a job again. And then there's another day I'll be like, oh no, I'm strong, independent. Who cares about people laying me off? I can do amazing things. So it's a lot. But eventually, what I find really grounding for myself is really about values. What kind of person you want to become? Is that why, because of that reason, you go to this place? Okay, it didn't work out. Do you want to keep taking that value to your next place? Is it the same things you're seeking for from the last place? It's okay to say that, you know what, I changed my mind. I don't think that works for me anymore. But being aware of that is still helpful for the next journey, you know? Yeah, I just
Yeah.
accidentally give you a lecture about like the controversies of behavioral research in the scientific field, because like behavioral research is relatively a new thing. I think it was start becoming a thing in 1940s or 50s, like in psychology. Because before that, it was a very psychoanalysis, like very much as like rah, But every research method,
You're talking
every
about like Milgram days or something like that, of when like when that stuff happened. That Milgram was probably like 1930s, I think.
yeah, like
Um,
there's I
let
guess
me
what I'm
Google real
saying
quick.
is that like the
1960s.
like 60s. Okay, now I know too. The all the kind of different experiment only show what happened, but we as human, fortunately, we have another layer of agency. We can see things as it is, and then say that, but I want to become a different thing. And chances are you can make a different thing. Even there are old patterns that is so strong that keeps happening, right? Chances are you can say that, but this time I want it different,
Mm-hmm.
take a different route. So like, which is hopefully a good thing. But in layoff, it's hard. It's hard. All you think about is like, how can I make myself a little bit happier? Like it's really hard to say that, okay, what's the bigger picture, what do I looking for? Be so intentional and mindful. That's just so hard.
Yeah, that's like very small percentage of the population. I feel like does that. Also, a very small percentage, not very small, but like one thing to note here is like if you have that time and space to do that, then that's amazing. I There's so many people who get laid off, and then there's like I need a job tomorrow,
Right,
right? Like
exactly.
I
Right
don't have
now,
time to be like,
I need a job
okay,
yesterday, actually.
yeah,
Not
what is my what is the next thing I'm looking for, or that type of thing, that you just have to like take. I think both of us are quite lucky in that, like, if I get laid off tomorrow, it's going to take some time probably to get a job, but I feel like we've built up some skills that like we can
yeah,
get hired,
yeah,
versus if I was like, I don't know, working at some other place, or just like working in a knowledge field, it'd be like, fuck, I need to go get a job like now.
yeah,
And it's like,
exactly.
um,
Well,
especially
that's
because you can work
true.
remote too, right? Like you have opportunities that, if I get laid off, I live in Providence, I get laid off by some restaurant here, I'm kind of limited by whatever is local to work in
Mhm.
the restaurant industry, for instance, versus like if for us, we could work for a company that's totally remote or based out of San Jose or whatever, Mexico City, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, that's I I do feel lucky. On one hand, I want to say to myself like, oh, how unlucky I was getting laid off, right? So recognizing that is one thing, and also, yeah, I'm like, yeah, I'm really lucky. So the fact that I still get a lot of people trying to help me in my network, there are people like really telling me that, hey, you have a lot of skills, like even if but the thing is that even if you have skill, it doesn't mean that you will get all the jobs out there, right? So
Yeah.
there's so many random things. So, but still, I do feel like there's something I can rely on, which is myself. You know, in during an uncertain time, you can still rely on yourself. You know that you have experience. That layoff cannot take that away. You know you have learned a lot of things to handle certain different issues, different problems. That no matter what your job performance is in the last job, it still comes with you, right? So in a way, like it's very grounding to feel like you can always be your biggest resources, in a way. But the hard thing is that when you get laid off, it's so hard to realize that or meaningfully convert that into an action. Because all you think about is that I'm in danger.
Mm.
I'm in danger. How can I save myself? Right. So that's our survival part of us kicked in. We forgot about the mindfulness of a part of us. It's just all like, I need a job. I need this. I need to talk to this person. I need to revise my resume. I need to like networking. I need to da 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 da. So, but I think there's a saying in Chinese that 磨刀不看柴工. So for my Chinese audience, like hopefully you understand. But basically, the idea is
Hopefully you got that right, actually, because I can't check you on that.
you don't trust my Chinese. Like, well, honestly, my Chinese is getting so bad that sometimes I feel more comfortable speaking in English, like which is bad because like last time I was in China, I got stuck. I don't know how to say certain things, and I want to speak English. But either way, the saying is what the saying is trying to say is that sharpen a blunt knife does not slow down your progress. Basically. So giving yourself a little bit time to recollect doesn't slow you down because somehow we think that's slowing down, right? The fastest thing it should be sending resumes, applying. But actually, I feel like clarifying your own mind and realign your thoughts a little bit and give you a little bit space to pause, actually accelerate your job hunting a little bit earlier. You're more targeting about what you want to do. You're more likely to find critical person that you are supposed to connect with to get some leads and then stuff like that. So I don't think that's a slowdown, but however, it does feel like a slowdown when you're in that situation. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. I mean, I always love all expressions. I have many from Japanese that I say to my wife.
Oh, come on, give me one.
They're unrelated to this, but I'll give you one. Let me not lose this train of thought, which is that as you say that, I think it's interesting. Of like, I mentioned before that companies will take some time and be like, "Hey, this pandemic time is a great time to reevaluate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does Airbnb need 10,000 employees to run a platform? Maybe not. Maybe we can cut 4,000."
Yeah.
So just like that, it's interesting. It's like a reshifting of mind. But I think I'm imagining, like, let's say I stay at Cisco for 15 years.
Yeah.
Um, let's say,
Yeah.
let's say I
Right.
stay at Cisco for 15 years, and then like I get laid off.
Yeah.
It's almost like you are on autopilot for a while. And in
Yeah.
some ways, this is obviously a very hard thing to do, but like it will give you a moment to then be like, I didn't make this decision, but someone just gave me the opportunity, or the company just made me now take some time to rethink and say, was this the place I should have been this whole time? Or should I,
Mhm.
like there is that time that you have like forced reflection and forced, um, basically like getting you out of just, should I be doing this on a day to day basis? Right. Like,
Mhm. Mhm.
and maybe it's not ideal, but hopefully for folks who, if you have the resources, both mental and money resources, that
Mhm.
you can take that time to be like, hey, I was working in this one industry, or I was doing this one particular job. Like, was that right for me?
Yeah.
Maybe I can start to recalibrate and really think about like where I may want to shift my career. That would have been really hard if I just stayed at that
Yeah.
same company for 15 years to like pop myself out, because it's easy to just like do the same thing over and over and over again.
Yeah. Well, I have a saying. There you go. Like, okay, now I'm gonna flex this muscle of mine. Like, there's another saying in Chinese, uh, which goes, 不识庐山真面目，只缘身在此山中. Meaning, if I can translate that really well, meaning that it's hard to tell the true faith of Mountain Lu. Mountain Lu is like a mountain in southern China, well, central China. The reason I couldn't tell the true look of a mountain is because you are inside of that mountain. You are climbing the mountain. You're in that moment. So you have to detach yourself and then
Mm.
go one step back to really realize what's going on and give yourself a chance to do it. It's a really hard thing to do, right? When you are in autopilot. And getting laid off might be one of those chances. It forces you to
Yeah.
get one step back and then see a little bit like, oh, what's going on? What have I been doing up to this moment? So hopefully that's what's gonna happen next, which is to me is that I can find a job that's like, which I do need a job. So I mean, so I do really hope I can get an offer soon.
Well, hopefully it's not just like, well, I don't, but unless you're on the job hunt for like 6 months or something like that.
Oh
But
yeah,
ideally, it's like you have chosen this job, you're still excited about it. Like it's a meaningfully, hey, I have like a well thought out, it's like easy, I think, especially for certain folks, maybe that like you get laid off, you're like, I just need a job. You take the next job, you're like, fuck, I hate this job, right? Like, or
yeah,
whatever it might be,
exactly.
right? So, like, that's where I was getting at. In ideal scenario, you can have the time and you have enough opportunities at hand that you like can meaningfully be like, okay, I know this is what I want next. This next place seems like it's going to fill at least a lot of things I'm looking for.
Yeah,
And like you're excited to go into the next role.
yeah.
Hopefully, that's what I'm hoping for you.
Hopefully, but like
I,
you ask me a lot. I have to ask you this, like at least once. Like we don't have to go into it if you don't want to, but it, I want to know your last life change too. Like you feel like it's a significant change in your career journey, life journey, or whatever that is.
yeah, that's interesting. I have to think. I feel like life changes. I mean, there's been decent amount of life changes for me. They don't feel that major though. Like I just like keep rolling on, right? Like so
Mm,
maybe the next major life change probably for me will be like have a kid, right? That's going to be like a major
I'm
my
so
daily
scared.
thing changes because
Yeah,
most things that are in my life, like we're getting a dog soon, that's going to be like minimal change.
minimal. Yeah, yeah,
Like it's gonna be some change, mostly positive, maybe some sleep, but like, we moved from Ann Arbor to Providence, which I was happy about. Again, life change.
mm.
But these aren't seemingly too major for me, or like I start new jobs. I
How
don't know.
about
I think the baby is going to be like the big thing for me. That's going to be like totally different. Of like, I'm so used to every morning I wake up
yeah,
5:45, 6 a.m. and I go read for an hour, right? And like you have a child, that's harder to do, right? Like,
yeah.
so like your routines that I'm so used to, I think is going to get totally messed up,
Well,
but
you
it's
in
different.
that way you pick up a new social identity. You're no longer Kanji anymore. You're the father of that whatever that person's name is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that's a lot.
Kenji Jr.
I hope your son or like your daughter or whoever listen to this like, oh my god, I can't believe I almost got called like Kanji Junior, like once. But I don't know if you are planning to have a kid or not, but like hopefully that's an easier
Plan at some
transition
point.
at some point. Exactly, like hopefully that's easier. But what about a sudden change, like something you never planned for, it just like bang, it happened in your face?
I mean, there's in the past the year ago, like my best friend
Okay,
passed away, committed suicide. So I'd say that's a pretty big. That's not like I don't know. Is that my day to day life change? No, but I talk to him almost every day or almost every other day. So it's like a big change of like you can no longer talk to this person or that person like
yeah.
doesn't exist. Um,
Oh
I would
my
say I
god.
guess that's a pretty big life change over the last like year or so. Uh,
Hunter,
yeah,
you're
yeah,
you're
it's not.
you're making me cry. Like seriously, I'm very fairly vulnerable these days. Like
Yeah,
because like there's something you said that hit me really hard. Like I think it might be that when you said that this person doesn't exist anymore. Like hit me pretty hard because it's a sense of loss, right? That's a similar feel I had. Like I felt like I lost something all of a sudden, and there's nothing you can do but accept. You know.
That's correct. Yeah, you can. I pick up sometimes. I pick a phone, and you're like, "Oh, I want to dial this. Dial
Oh,
his number." And
oh my.
I could dial his number, but no one's going to answer, or someone weird is going to answer at the other end of whoever got his number. But yeah, that has happened a lot of times. We're like, "Oh, I want to talk to my buddy," and then can't do it. So,
Do you need a hug, Kanji?
yeah, next time you come to Providence, or next time you come to Chicago, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
I need a
I think,
hug right now, so like,
yeah, yeah, we can hug it out for sure.
for sure.
Um, I'm going to switch topics real quick.
Yeah.
The Japanese phrase that I use often
Ooh.
is my wife. Actually, I use a few, but the one that I got from my dad was it goes, what is it? It's tatsutori ato nigozazu, which means like the
Mhm.
bird that takes off doesn't muddy the water. Um,
The burn.
the bird that takes
The
off
bird. Okay.
doesn't muddy the water. So if you think
Okay.
about a bird in the lake, it like takes off. There's very little ripple effects. So
Mm,
the meaning of the expression is kind of like if you leave a place
hmm.
of like whether that's a job or apartment, right? Like you leave it in a good spot, basically.
Yeah.
I used to like laugh at my dad when I was younger, but I think that's actually really good. Uh, I really like that phrase. So like when we left like Ann Arbor, and my
Yeah.
wife's like, "Oh, it's fine. Like we can just kind of like clean up, whatever. Like we can just do like minimal cleanup." I'm like, "No, actually, you know, actually we can't. Tatsuri ato nigozazu. Like we have to like clean up and like leave this in a good way, right? Or like, you know,
Yeah.
if you leave a job, you quit a job,
Yeah.
right? Like leaving things good, you leave the other designer in a good
Love
spot.
it.
Ideally, like you're trying to do your best, even as you exit the building or whatever, that type of thing.
That's that's awesome. I mean, I think it's more than a true. It's less a truth. It's more than an attitude that person can have towards closure, close towards like saying goodbye. Something like that. And I love that attitude. It's really like treating goodbye almost as equally important as like beginning something, right? And it is a closure in many ways. And I honestly feel like part of my sadness when I got laid off, especially the first few days, is really because I don't get to say a goodbye really well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have my closure. I just got like sorry, bye, see ya, like like
Yeah,
this done. So I feel like if I could say like have my ritual, like have my formal ways of saying that here is the things I hope we can keep working on. Here's the good handover, the good like um, coming to a term with it, saying that I'm ready to move on now, and I'm closing the book on my own rather than people close the book on me. So I think that will definitely help a lot emotionally. I don't
yeah,
think it will help like financially at all, but emotionally it helps a lot in terms of like the readiness to move on and then stuff like that. So I like that. I like that. Um, Okay, I'm gonna search for it, like whatever that phrase is. The
I
bird.
think we need one episode we're gonna have to do is just going to be like we're going to talk about phrases and life philosophy because I feel like
All
there
the
are
weird
probably
phrases.
some good ones, some good ones in there.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I have specific, I think, like life philosophies or ways of thinking that
Mm,
I think it would be an interesting pod to talk about. Actually, maybe it's related to UX, maybe it's not. It relates to work for sure. At least mine relate to work.
yeah.
Oftentimes when I'm thinking of stuff,
That's that's
but
good.
that's
I,
a
I think
future pod.
I love it because like this is my assumption, but like sounds like UX people tend to. There's a reason why we chose US as a career, right? And many of us think that we like that connection with people as one of the ways. So I think it does apply to us in many ways.
Yeah,
Like, those are not only just plain knowledge, but it has so much of like, relatedness. Like you can relate to that a lot. It's some human elements in it. So love it. So we should totally do that. But I don't know how helpful that would be for the audience, but for us, that's like really fun.
well, I think it'd be interesting to the audience of just like
Now you know more about birds and Japanese, and then
no, no, no. Yeah, no, I'm just talking
kidding.
about like what are there are pieces of of things that people say that like that I don't know. So Kevin Kelly, sorry, I'm gonna go tangent here. Kevin Kelly, founder of Wired. I'm gonna put this in show notes. He had a good article that came out. He writes these like every few years now, but he has like an article out that's like 103 pieces of advice that I learned over the past 70 years. So he just turned 70. He's
Mm-hmm.
a kind of like Kevin Kelly is like a very optimistic guy, obviously
Mm-hmm.
futurist or whatever, technologist, co-founder of Wired, right? But very like if you listen to him in interviews, he's very like positive person. Even now, like he sounds like youthful, even though he's 70. Um, but what I was going with that was like his advice. One of his advice, not in that article, but he was like, I wish actually more people just like published their advice or talked about their advice because I think
Mm-hmm.
it is often, not just if you're Kevin Kelly, but like
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes you pick up little things from people, here and there. Like I've picked up things that are, it's not necessarily they're like the, masters of the universe, but like you're just like, okay, oh, I should factor that into how I work or whatever, or how I think. So that's why I think it could be interesting for the audience, even if we're just two
Yeah.
schlups in the UX industry, doling out life advice, or not even life advice, but like philosophies of how we think.
Yeah. I mean, I love that. Like, it turns the table a little bit. It's less about we talk about things that's worth talking about. We just provide things, and people can pick the things that means to them the most, and then that's also good learning too.
Yeah.
So for me too, I would love to hear all
I,
the
I,
bird saying that you
and
have.
caveat I think is that he says too, and I've heard from other folks, is like, actually, I want to say, like I'm quoting him,
Yeah,
I don't like to give advice, but rather I like to say what has worked or not worked for me, and it may or may not work for you, but just like
yeah, yeah,
sharing what has or has not worked for me, or
yeah.
for your particular scenario.
Oh my god.
All right, shall we wrap it up for episode 16?
Wait, let's do it. It's really about layoff, and we talk about what we talked about. We talked about what that looks like, what kind of a mindset a person might have, using Licheng as an example,
Correct.
and also what kind of how we can take a different perspective on this, as well as how much we can learn from this experience of being laid off, either for people who got laid off or people who are going through similar sudden life change like Kenji, right? So you share a little bit about life change, not necessarily the layoff, but there's still much we can learn from this. Sometimes you're forced to come to a term with what is happening around you, and there's a lot we can learn from that, and there's a lot more, and how we act really speak to you know who we are too, in a
Mhm.
way. So like I really love it, and I feel like I feel I just talked to my therapy, and just like maybe we should charge like our audience like for therapy sessions. So yeah, people like send me your mother's maiden name, your date of birth, your social security number, as well as your credit card number and your insurance information, so that we can charge you.
Or they should charge us for basically allowing us to have our therapy session, right? Like they're like, hey, we are listening to you and we're listening for free, but really you should pay us because this is a time for therapy, your therapy, essentially.
Exactly. It's
What
like,
I will say that I took away from, just our chat today and listening to you, I think is like, there's almost seems to be, after your time of layoff, after you got laid off, there's like almost like a battle of two. I'm not going to use the battle of two wolves, but I'll use it. That's different. That's a different proverb or story. There's a battle of two wolves in your body, and which one do you listen to? And it's like which one you choose. Anyway, there's a
yeah.
battle of two wolves, and one is like telling you, seemingly like it's like, oh man, like I'm kind of worthless, or how come this happened to me, and this is
Mhm.
terrible, and like this is all my fault. And the other is almost like you're a cheerleader and you're trying to like get over it, and it's like, okay, I'm really, I am skilled and I am good. And it just like or like some days you feel lazy and some days you feel motivated, and just like understanding maybe that that's going to be a general natural process
Mhm.
there of
Mhm.
like feeling both, and then ultimately allowing yourself to be like, hey, both are kind of normal feelings,
Yeah.
actually, of
Yeah.
like ups
Yeah.
and downs, ups and downs, ups and downs.
They're all you. They're like, but you, me, right?
Yeah.
So They're all different part of you. They're just trying to different job. The first person who are trying to kind of worn you down a little bit. Almost sounds like so negative, right? But what they're trying to do is actually protect you by telling you that, oh, like you need to do more, you need to do more. It's a way to motivate you to do more. So in a way, it's also trying to help you. It's just from a different perspective. Another person is hopefully is more mindful, but you need another side to actually have the motivation too. Because like adversaries is a good source of motivation for us to improve, to like do more, like do things that we never thought of like we'll be doing. So they're all helpful, but it's up to us to kind of try to be mindful about when we probably shouldn't overly leaning on the negative side, because like we really need to do something different, right? And that's the hard part, knowing when should we lean on which part of us and how we think, and make the most out of the life, which I'm still struggling to, by the way. It's not like I've mastered this. Like there are definitely days I'm just like, oh my God, like life sucks. Like, but the fact that of like going back and forth is growth. Like. So and that's cannot be it cannot be taught at school, and can only be learned by experiencing in moments like this, which sucks, but it's a good learning lesson, hopefully.
Good. All right. I have nothing else to add. We could talk about, I think forever. What I was gonna say was, as you're talking about, like, you haven't figured this out yet, and it reminds me of like, but this is why we're having this conversation, because it's similar to when people write like books, right? Like nonfiction books or self-help books. They're like, I haven't figured this out yet, but I'm interested in it. And so I'm going to go research and go write about it because I want to actually go learn about it. Not necessarily like sometimes it is, they're already the expert, but sometimes it's also like, I don't know much about it, but if I writing this book is how I'm going to figure it out, right? If I was like writing a book about dealing with anxiety, maybe I was dealing with really bad anxiety and I want to write a book about it because I'm not an expert, but I was like, I'm going through the journey. So it's like this podcast is you saying, hey, I haven't figured this out after getting laid off, but like by having this conversation, it's like part of the journey basically of figuring out how to go to the next, how to move forward after getting laid off.
Yeah. Now I you definitely convinced me that we should be charged for
Correct.
therapy session rather other way around. So okay, I'm convinced. So send me your mother's maiden name and everything so that I can contact your insurance.
All
Yeah,
right. So
good
that
time.
wraps up episode 16 on layoffs. Licheng, thank you so much for sharing today. And we'll be back hopefully soon.
Hopefully soon. Thank you for having me.
Bye.
Bye.